Southwest Florida's newest game in town brings you all the NFL action that you're asking for. Lloyd and Kevin have all the news, updates, trades, and rumors from the NFL. Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Sports Radio 102.9 The Game starts now.
Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back for another week on 1029 The Game in a Broad Street South network. We're back, everybody. Lloyd Vance and my tag team partner, Kevin Midgette, we're back to talk all things NFL. I know we were on a little hiatus there, but hopefully you're able to come back and join us. And we're so excited to be back with everybody. Training camp will be here before we know it. I know this is the dog days of baseball and not much else going on, but there's always something to talk about the National Football League because the NFL never sleeps. So, Kevin, how you doing, man? Did you take any vacation time during your hiatus? What did you do with yourself?
Money never sleeps, Lloyd. I was working the whole time. But I tell you what, you want to talk about dog days of summer, dog days of June already. I can take some dog days at the end of July and August. It's been ungodly hot out here in the mid-Atlantic.
Yeah, it's been so hot here. I mean, Angel, I know you're down in Florida, but up here, man, it was 90, 95. It felt like a piece of bacon. It was ridiculous. And I can only imagine if this heat wave continues as the players get to training camp, they're going to have to roll some things back because it's they have the equipment on and it's just like, wow, But as I said, always something to talk about National Football League. And I did wet my beak a little bit I watched the UFL championship as the Birmingham Stallions dominated their way to the win over the San Antonio Brahmas. Good win. I think the league is going to stick around, which is a big thing. And maybe they can become, I'm not saying a minor league for the NFL, but they can have a spring alternative. And I already saw a couple players from that league being signed. Kevin, did you watch any of that? And do you think spring football is viable? I know you and I grew up on the old USFL with the Stars and Chuck Vicina and all those guys. But do you think it's viable, spring football?
I think there's a market for it. There's no doubt about it. The NFL is 12 months a year now. I mean, there is always going to be somebody who wants to watch it. And once again, not to be that guy who keeps bringing it up, but it's a betting world we live in, and there's a lot of gambling sites, so it's some action going on in the spring as well.
Yeah, and more states are approving gambling. I just saw that. So I think maybe up to like 30 plus states out there that now have some kind of gambling and it's not going away, as you said. It's here to stay.
Yeah,
and everybody's got to have it on their phone. Yep, go ahead.
I was just going to say, going back to the championship game, though, I was rooting for Birmingham to win because I love it when cities and areas that never win championships don't have like the big major sports teams can actually get a championship for that city. I remember when the University of Rice won the College Baseball World Series one year. In college hockey, you get like Mankato State. They're not winning anything in real, like the major things. But for those areas to get a huge win like that, good for them, good for their city.
Yeah, and that was the third straight win for the Birmingham Stallions. They ended up they won the USFL the last 2 years, and now they win the UFL. And as I said, the league looks like it was viable. They have contracts with Fox, ABC, ESPN. So I think they're going to be around for a while, which is good. As we were saying earlier, there's a lot of players out there that want opportunities. And NFL teams have 90 players on a roster at this time, but all those guys are not going to make the team, because in late August, they got to cut down from 90 to 53, and a lot of these guys need jobs. So good opportunity for them. I know my son was saying to me, well, do these guys even get paid? Yeah, they get paid some. It's not like making an NFL roster, but it's a progression. And I think for the younger guys, it could be a stepping stone for some of them. So, much to look at there in terms of it. And Kevin I sent you some show notes and some things other than that championship, we're going on around the league now. One of the biggest things was Justin Jefferson signs the largest contract of a non-quarterback on June 3rd, 4 years, $140 million extension, $110 million guaranteed. Ton of money for a receiver. We know it's a passing league right now. Do you think this is the trend we're looking at? I know CeeDee Lamb's licking his chops and some of these other receivers. Is this the trend going forward where the receivers are going to get paid such high money?
Oh, absolutely. There's no regression now going backwards, with the wide receiver position because it is the dominant throwing league now, and it's conducive for receivers putting up big numbers. The thing is, signing Justin Jefferson for that kind of money, you better hope you found someone that can get him the ball because that's a lot of money tied up in that guy. If you can't get Sam Darnold or JJ or somebody to get him the ball, and he's
Yeah.
going to be disgruntled as well because you know why? He's got some guaranteed money now. So I'm going to let you know what I really think about you if I'm not getting the ball.
Yeah, Ziggy Wilt, the owner there, signed him to that big contract, and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, the general manager, they did a good job getting him under contract. But as you said, big question mark whether it's Jaron Hall, whether it's J.J. McCarthy, Sam Darnold, who's trying to revive his career with, I believe, his fourth team. Who's going to get him the ball? And the thing is, though, in the NFC North, this division is coming along and is very competitive. The Detroit Lions turned everything around. I had a huge year last year. Green Bay Packers made some noise in the playoffs, and even the Chicago Bears are feeling optimistic after drafting Caleb Williams and signing a bunch of free agents. So, going to be a competitive division, and you just wonder, are the Vikings going to get the return for their investment there? We talk about that because, as I said, just so many guys are looking at that contract and saying, okay, when's my turn? And there was another contract recently. It was just last week. Trevor Lawrence. Now he becomes the highest paid quarterback in the National Football League. Average salary of $55 million per season, tying Joe Burrow, who's also at $55 million, and Jared Goff, who just got a contract this season, off season, at $53 million, are just ahead of him. So, what do you think of this Lawrence contract? All these guys I've named, they have not won a Super Bowl, and these quarterback salaries are getting absolutely crazy. And you have the Dallas Cowboys sitting out there, and I'm hearing a crazy thing that Dak Prescott may make $60 million a season. That's what they're talking about. So, what are we thinking about in terms of these quarterback salaries? And I mean, I'll ask the obligatory question: are they worth it?
Yeah, considering the fact probably in another 2 years these are going to be chump change deals because they're going to keep going through. And the market just keeps getting. Remember when the Eagles locked up Carson Wentz? It's like, oh, they probably saved money down the road, which they probably did if he was, healthy and played out right. You have to sign these guys now because another year or two, the market's going to be even more through the roof. I tell you what, though, I would love to be a fly on the wall for CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott talking right now. It's like, come on, Jerry, sign them, load them up, Jerry. As Eagles fan, I will say, I want these guys locked up. I want Jerry to be with these guys. Write a big check, Jerry. Keep them there because then you're going to be tied up
Yeah.
more in cap space than you already are.
And Micah Parsons is he wants a new deal as well. And the Cowboys, and we'll get to them in a minute, but they're a mess, and Jerry Jones is in his 80s. What are they going to do in terms of this team? But a lot of question marks there. But in terms of quarterback, yeah, Dak Prescott going to make a lot of money. He's getting a contract. Jordan Love's supposed to get a new contract for the Green Bay Packers as well. And you just wonder, the sky's the limit with them. I know the new deal CBA is coming up soon, about 3 years, I believe. They're going to have new TV money coming in. Revenues are through the roof. We know with the NFL. I think they're making about $13 billion a season, something crazy like that. And I just think the cap's going to get higher. And as you said, it's just going to become the new normal. These guys making $50 million plus. But I'm going to run through the highest paid quarterbacks, and then we'll talk about, are they worth it? And we'll look at the best quarterback out there who has 3 Super Bowl rings and where he shakes out in this. So We'll start top to bottom. Trevor Lawrence, 55 million. Joe Burrow, 55 million. Jared Goff, 53 million. This is all per season. Justin Herbert, 52.4 million. Lamar Jackson, the two-time MVP, 52 million per. Jalen Hurts, 51 million per season. And then there's a little drop off. Kyler Murray, 46.1. Deshaun Watson, and we can hot seat there. 46 million for him. Patrick Mahomes comes in at number 9, highest paid, 45 million per season. Kirk Cousins is at 10, 45 million. And then you have Josh Allen in the 11th spot at 43 million. So, when you're talking about these quarterbacks, as you said, with the Carson Wentz situation, they can rip up these contracts and move on from them. But in terms of these guys, are they worth it? This hierarchy, does that shock you the way I read it off, or what are you thinking when you hear these names and the amount of money they're making?
I think it comes to a time and a situation where it's not real money. If you were put in a room with that money, you'd be like, wow. But these are just numbers right now to like an average working person. You can't even fathom that kind of money right now. I don't know what kind of world we live in where Kyler Murray's making $46 million a year. So you got to be kidding me. And the fact Josh Allen will get money and he will jump up the list and he'll probably be the next highest paid guy when he gets a contract. And it's almost like being a one-hit wonder on Billboard music chart. It's like you hold the number one spot for a week or two and then somebody else moves up and takes it over. So it just keeps going up, and that's why you have to lock these guys up. That's why Green Bay should lock up Jordan Love right now, because it's just going to be worse down the road.
Yeah, and it's very competitive between the players and their agents. They want to be that guy that has that, the cachet of saying, "Oh, I'm the highest paid quarterback in the National Football League." Doesn't mean they're the best, obviously. So all these guys that I named, except Mahomes, they got their deficiencies, and they're being paid a lot of money. And the thing is, they're taking up a large part of the salary cap. I talked to a cap guy a while back, and he was saying, your quarterback and your frontline guys, your most teams, it's their left tackle, their cover corner, now receiver. Now that we're talking about Justin Jefferson, you want those guys to probably only be about 40% of your cap number, because so many other guys got to eat and get their, be paid as well. Because the big thing is teams that seem to do well and get these quarterbacks on their rookie deal, which is their first 5 seasons. And then they build in other spots. And that's what the Niners really have done. I know they have not gotten it done in terms of winning a Super Bowl, but they got Purdy under contract. He's another guy that's coming up. And they've been able to maneuver around that deal because he's being paid so low. They can pay their defensive players, which several of their defensive players are highest guys around the league, that amount of money. So, as we said, it's just something around the NFL that it's the new normal. So I guess we got to get used to it. But as you said, it's crazy when you're talking about this. Like, wow, to the average person, it's like, okay, this is like monopoly money. And hey, if Jeffrey Lurie, Arthur Blank, all these owners with these billionaires with a B want to throw their money at these guys, and go ahead and let them. But their return on their investment is not very good. And the one you got to point to, as I was saying, is Deshaun Watson. $46 million per season. I think the total contract is around $260 million, all guaranteed. And it just shows you, if you make a mistake, you're stuck with that guy. And they're going to have to eat a large portion of that contract if they want to get rid of him. We saw the Denver Broncos just do that this past off season. They're going to pay Russell Wilson $39 million, basically go away this season and play for the Steelers. And talking about Deshaun Watson, do you think he can ever become the player he was in Houston, and can he live up to that guaranteed money that they gave him?
Nobody can live up to that guaranteed money that he was given. It's impossible. He'd have to rattle off Mahomes type, winning, MVPs and Super Bowls and everything else. That being said, I don't know if he can get back to it. It all depends on how much dedication Deshaun has to his craft. If he sits there and puts the work in, he's got the ability. We know that. We've seen it. But at the same time, I tell you what, you pay me $260 million. Am I bringing the same A game effort every single time? I don't know. I'm not going to crucify that guy. I don't know if my heart's totally into it right now. Some days yes, some days no. So I mean, until you walk a mile in that guy's shoes, I mean, if he has the dedication to put in the work and get back to where he was, sure, he can do it. But will he?
Yeah, and you and I are. I think you're a Sixers fan, Andrew Bynum type situation. Bynum got that money, and he was like, "Oh, I'm hurt. I'm done." Anything not to actually earn it, and sometimes that just happens with these free agents and guys that get that big deal. That hunger is just not there anymore, and too often they don't live up to their contracts. Now, the thing is with football, other than Deshaun Watson's deal, the contracts are not guaranteed. So, like you're saying, a lot of it's fake money. Most of the players and their agents, they want to get that upfront payday, the signing bonus, and the guaranteed money up front. But it eventually, like the last 2 years, most of the time, they're just like most contracts aren't even making it that far. So it's a crazy game in terms of contracts, and I always tell fans, I'm like, don't focus on the amount of money these guys are making because it'll drive you nuts.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that's
and,
not
and,
the
and you're
moral
all,
battle I'm picking. Like these guys. Go ahead. I was just going to say, it's like I never begrudge any of these players getting the money they get. Good for them. If someone's going to write you a huge check like that, what are you going to say?
yes,
No, please don't give me all this money. It's like all of us would be like, all right, where do I sign?
exactly. And they want it, and like, if they live up to it, God bless them. But most of them don't, and that's just the name of the game. But in NFL, they tear it up, and these guys can. It's basically a series of 1 year contracts, and too often in the off season, that's what people are getting caught up in. And one of the things we're going to talk about now on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game Broad Street South Network is holdouts, the holdout watch list, and you talk about money. Everybody's always like, oh, he's getting more. And it's just not like the old days where guys would sit out all training camp. And now I think they get fined up to $40,000 per day missed when they're a signed player. So you're not going to see those extended holdouts. But a couple players are talking tough. We'll see if they actually follow through with this. CeeDee Lamb's one of them for the Dallas Cowboys. He did not report to any of the mandatory mini camps and so forth. Do you think holdouts are what they used to be? I still remember, covering like Terrell Owens with the Eagles in his holdout where he was trying to get some money and it became a circus. But what do you think in terms of holdouts? Is that still something that we can talk about?
I rarely see anybody win in that situation. I see people getting fined, or it gets to the point where they finally get the guy to come back in and they waive the fines that they gave him. My favorite one I remember, it was from the early to mid 80s. Jerry Robinson, who's always the trivia question there for the linebacker, he was holding out of camp. And it was old school. This is where like reporters would like show up at your house and knock on the door and everything. And they had a camera crew, and on his front door it just had a sign that said "Gone fishing." He was out. You couldn't call him. There's no cell phones.
That's
It was just
great.
like, yeah, I'm out right now. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, no one
And
really
Kev,
wins in those situations. Yeah,
they don't. They don't. And it creates animosity, where they, like in Tampa, I remember talking to one former player. Hugh Culverhouse was an owner down there, and it was just a known fact. He did not want to pay anybody. He was going to make guys struggle for, you know, getting that contract that was up there with the rest of their peers. And as you said, a lot of animosity. You and I are from the Philadelphia area, Kevin, and we remember Norman Bremen was the owner of the Eagles. And it was just like an unspoken rule. Everybody that wanted to get a contract on the level of their peers or whatever, you had to fight tooth and nail for it. And the holdouts were very prevalent. It came even to the point, Reggie White, probably one of the greatest defensive players of all time, he had to go to court to become a free agent, and then he finally got allowed to go to the Green Bay Packers.
yeah, it was definitely a different era back then. And you still to this day have these owners that won't. It's a business, and that's what it means to them. It's a matter of how many nickels can I get out of this team while I own it before I can break it off and make a profit off of that. And you get other owners like you see Jeffrey Lurie, who's invested in this team emotionally and financially. And I think that's what you need.
Yeah, the Eagles have done a great job in terms of, identifying young players and then getting them under contract. And then, as you said, Kevin, it may not be the highest one, but they're going to pay them at a nice, acceptable level that will keep the guy around on the team and probably happy. So this all season, they made sure that they took care of Devontae Smith, their wide receiver, who now people are saying, "Oh, he signed too early," but he got a nice extension. Brown got an extension as well, and then I believe it was Cam Jurgens, not Cam Jurgens.
It was Landon,
Landon Dickerson, their offensive guard. So, they identify their guys and they make sure they build around them in their roster, give them those signing bonuses. So, yeah, kudos to them for doing a good job there. Now, one of the things, Kevin, now some of these guys, every year I put together a list and I say need to step up. There's a lot of players around the National Football League. We talked about one earlier, and Deshaun Watson. He's got to step up because if he's hurt and cannot play, all that guarantee money, I think Jimmy Haslam, the owner there, and Andrew Barry, the GM, they may start saying, you know what, he's not worth the bang for the buck. They just may cut him. So he's definitely a guy that needs to step up. And I'll just throw a couple other ones that I wrote down here, and then you can throw me a few that you're thinking out. We talk a lot about the Philadelphia Eagles and their defense. They're trying to remake that group, under Vic Fangio, their brand new defensive coordinator. I just put this one as Philadelphia Georgia players need to step up, whether it's Jordan Davis, who needs to be in better shape, be able to play consistently. Nolan Smith, who they drafted very high, did not give them much last year. Jalen Carter, a guy who played well probably the first 7 games or so, and it kind of drifted off. And then Nakobe Dean, who I think may be in trouble in terms of making his team. There's some of the names that I got to throw out there that need to step up. Who do you have?
Just in the NFL, just off the top of my head, I'm going to throw Danny Dimes with the Giants there. Danny Dimes has to defend that contract a little bit. Yeah, it's like, because if not, they're not very quiet up in New York. So, he's going to be hearing about that one. And also an acquisition that was made in the offseason, Joe Mixon has to step up for that Houston Texans team. They're trying to set up to win now, and he's their lead back right now. He needs to definitely show up for that team.
Yeah, and running back, that's a good position for you to bring up in terms of step up because, there was a time where the NFL teams were built around a running back. And here in Philadelphia where I am, Saquon Barkley definitely has to step up. I was talking to some Giants fans, and they were like, yeah, we're sorry to see him go, but he's injured often. Yes, there was offensive line woes, but, with that contract that he was given, he's got to definitely step up and kind of be the bell cow. Conversely, the Eagles' offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, has got to use him the right way because we talked about last year, the DeAndre Swift was kind of forgotten a guy a lot in the Eagles' offense. So do you think that the Eagles will use Barkley correctly? What are we thinking when we're thinking in terms of their game plan? Everybody is really putting all their eggs in the Kellen Moore basket, and they're talking about him being able to call the plays. But I also want to talk about the elephant in the room. What's the head coach doing? What's the head coach, Nick Sirianni, doing for the Eagles?
He's watching plants grow. He's helping plants grow. That's what Nick does. He's a botanist. Everything's a flower and plant, and it blossoms. And Nick's the rah-rah guy at this point right now. And as we all know, it can work if you have your offensive and defensive coordinator and you're managing everything. Mike Tomlin is, he's the greatest at that. He lets his guys do his thing, but he runs that ship. There's no doubt about it. I don't know if Nick can be a Mike Tomlin in that situation. I think Nick's one of those guys, he can't help himself. Like, things will just pop out of his mouth sometimes. He'll just do certain things, and Nick might be his own worst enemy in this situation.
Yeah. And there are definitely question marks, and guys, you're thinking, okay, they got to step up now. You're talking about Houston. I wrote down Stephon Diggs. He's coming over from the Bills. This will now be, his third team that he's on, and he's got to prove that he's worth the headache. Too often these receivers are diva guys and they're me players. Now it's going to be interesting to see how he fits in with Tank Dell and the rest of the talent there. But do you think Stephon Diggs is due for a bounce back? Do you think if he's not the number one receiver, he's going to fit in, or could he potentially be a problem for a young team that's ascending?
I think Stephon Diggs will be fine as long as they win. If they're winning and Nico Collins is getting a bunch of the rips right there and Tank Dell and everyone, even, was it Mechie or whatever, the third or whatever they have there. If those guys are getting the ball and he's not getting the bulk of it, I think he's okay until they start losing. If they start losing, you're going to see him bust out in diva performance.
Yeah, and he was very petulant last year, fighting with Josh Allen, fighting over his contract. He didn't receive enough targets, even though he had 107 or so. And he had some key drops in some situations where the Bills really needed him to step up. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he fits in with that Houston Texans team. And they're one of the other big ones. We talked about him earlier, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Which one is going to step up and be the Steelers quarterback? But I see both of them as guys that, they got to equate. They're fighting for their existence in the National Football League. They got to see where they're, especially Russell Wilson. Yeah, he got that big payday from Denver Broncos. But do you think, well, I'll ask you, which one do you think is going to be the starter? And then do you think they can resurrect their careers, both of them?
I think Russell starts a season. I think that's going to be locked in right there. I think Justin Fields is definitely going to start at some point during the season, whether it's due to injury, whether it's just at a point where Russell hits this malaise where, he's throwing like 184 yards, one pick, one touchdown, and they feel like they need to jazz it up a little bit. I did see also with, the Steelers lost Deontay Johnson. They had a nice little 1-2 punch with Pickens and him. Now you got not really a great second wide receiver option for them. So Freiermuth, the tight end, apparently is someone they're going to utilize more because the offensive coordinator really tends to go to the tight end. So I think it's one of those things. I think Tomlin's just going to get to a point where it's like we got to give Justin Fields a run here, and it'll probably be injury related where they drag it out and be like, "No, we're just going to sit you this week, just see what Justin Fields can do."
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because Arthur Smith is now their offensive coordinator for the Steelers. Coming over from the Falcons, we talked about how stale that Falcons offense was, even though they had so many weapons on it. And are they going to be able to, change something? Now, I think with terms of the Steelers, Najee Harris is going to be very important to that offense. They're going to try to get back to Steelers football, running the ball, and then going from there. I think, if they do run the ball, that'll be the best friend of Russell Wilson or Justin Fields going forward. So that'll help them. And anything's got to be better than Kenny Two Gloves Pickett. And he's the Eagles' backup. Now, as crazy as this sounds, and I listen to all the radio here in Philadelphia, and sometimes I'm yelling at the radio, come on, stop. They're saying Jalen Hurts has not looked good in the mini camps, and Kenny Pickett may get a run. I mean, seriously. Now, Jalen Hurts is he's on the hot seat. Now what are you thinking in terms of Jalen Hurts? And I was having a debate with my son, and I'll kind of go from there in terms of Jalen Hurts. But what do you see with him this season? I see a guy, 23 touchdowns last year, but he did have his 15 interceptions, threw it in double coverage, triple coverage, way too much. And then obviously, like the team, he kind of faltered down the stretch. So he's making $51 million a season. What do we see in terms of Jalen Hurts? And I don't know if you heard it, but they asked him about Nick Sirianni, and there seemed to be a little contention when he answered the question, almost like, I really don't know what Nick's doing. Who cares? Kellen Moore's running the show now. That's what I took from his comment.
Yeah. I think Jalen will be just fine. I really do. I think he's gonna be solid. Maybe he'll be above average. Do I think he's that quarterback that took him to the Super Bowl? I don't know. I mean, you can't imagine the pressure this guy felt on him, especially losing in the Super Bowl. You're 10-1, and then when the wheels started to come off a little bit, I'm forcing things now. Now I'm going to really try to throw things in the double, triple coverage because I got to do this on my own because I'm the leader of this team. So perhaps with Kellen Moore in there, someone who can ground him a little more, we can see Jalen make that maturation process now to be, somebody who can say, "I'll throw this one away," instead of trying to get it in there.
Yeah. And we're talking quarterbacks on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Broad Street South Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. Thanks for joining us and talking about Jalen Hurts. And he was the barometer. I was having this, me and my son debate so much over players and stuff. And I was like, all right, quarterbacks better than Jalen Hurts, quarterbacks worse than Jalen Hurts. So I'll name the ones I said were better, and then we can go from there. So I had Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, and then here's where it gets iffy: is Jordan Love, C.J. Stroud, and then I'm going to say this one, and I'm sure I'll see Kevin and Angel make a face: is Dak Prescott better than Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I agree with Angel on that one. We're going with a big hell no there. The ones that I would throw up there, Jalen's better than Jordan Love right now. Exactly.
I love
exactly. Jalen's better than Jordan Love. The ones that you mentioned that were better than Jalen, I'm pretty much on board with right now. I think Justin Herbert still is going to. I liked him 2 years ago. Last year, it didn't really work out. You got Harbaugh there now, but he really doesn't have anyone to throw to. So it's not the fact that even if he's better than Jalen, he's no way going to put up the numbers that Jalen's going to put up. Two was one to look at in Miami. Do I think he's better than Jalen? No.
Yeah,
go ahead.
They're talking about Tua getting that to that $50 million range as well. And if I'm Miami, I don't pay him that type of money. He gets injured way too much. And, I think a lot of his numbers are a byproduct of he has a lot of talent around him, but that's going to be a big question for Stephen Ross down there, Chris Greer, the general manager, and they're going to have to decide what to do with Tua because he's another player that's coming up on the end of his rookie deal, and then he's looking at that Trevor Lawrence deal that was just signed, and him and his representation say, "Hey, I need that type of money too." I took my team to the playoffs, and that's going to be a very interesting question. So, one of the guys I didn't name, and I think Hurts is better than him, is Kirk Cousins. Now, he got all that money. In his career, he's made over $200 million or something crazy like that, but all said and done. Do you think Cousins can turn around this Atlanta Falcons team? There's so much talent on that team with Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Drake London. They went about fixing that offensive line. Right now, I'm thinking they could be my surprise team in the NFC South. What are we thinking in terms of Kirk Cousins? And then Cousins is going to be looking over his shoulder because they drafted Michael Penix Jr., who we talked about way back when the draft occurred.
I think Kirk Cousins gets into the playoffs. I think they win that division. It's a very, very winnable division. I think Drake London's going to be the big breakout on that team. I think Drake London's going to hang some numbers because Cousins will go to him. There's no doubt. Now, Kyle Pitts, on the other hand, that guy's a stiff. Everyone talks about Kyle Pitts all the time. Kyle Pitts is a stiff. I don't care. That guy's had so many opportunities. And I'm not a Kyle Pitts guy whatsoever. But Kirk Cousins, I think they win that division and get to the playoffs.
Yeah, Pitts, he's solid. He's a new tight end. He's a guy they put him. He's just a big receiver. You know what I mean? If you're asking him to block and do the all around thing, no, I don't think he's in the George Kittle range or some of these other guys. All the guys that were a tight end this past week, and so yeah. But we'll see how they turn around that unit. Raheem Moore's now the head coach there for the Atlanta Falcons. He's trying to change some things, but they can win in that division. But yeah, I'm interested to see do they have enough footballs for all these weapons? Because a lot of times when you have all those guys that I named, it's just like, okay, who's going to get their catches? And I covered the Eagles, and the Eagles are similar because the Eagles have two frontline receivers. They have a pretty good tight end. And we talked about Saquon coming over there. In the past, I've seen a lot of teams where there's some jealousy in terms of, and we talked about the receivers being a diva position. I want my targets too, just like this guy over here. So we'll see how all that works out. Another quarterback I wanted to talk about with Kevin here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game. Now, this guy's always the story. He's the me guy, and I put him behind Hurts, and it was probably because of his age. Obviously, he's a future Hall of Famer, but Aaron Rodgers is who I'm talking about. Now, Aaron Rodgers made the big decision. I'm not showing up in mandatory minicamp. After last year, he made a whole hullabaloo and talking to Zach Wilson and praying for the Hard Knocks cameras about team and being prepared and being a professional. He doesn't show up for mini camp. A lot of pressure on the New York Jets. They have the over the hill gang now with Teron Smith coming over there with him. Mike Evans as well, the receivers there, and some other older players like Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard that he brought over with him. They're even talking about signing maybe David Bakhtiari to come help out. But what are we thinking when it's Aaron Rodgers, and can they be in a mix in the AFC East that I think is it's becoming a pretty tough division there? Because obviously you have the Bills there, and Miami's coming along as well. So what are we thinking in terms of Aaron Rodgers and the Jets?
I think people covering the NFL, ourselves included, every national media outlet talks about a guy who hasn't played basically in 2 years a lot because he's Aaron Rodgers and he's a name. But it's like this guy really hasn't been on the field except for a couple of minutes for a very long time now. And he is on the other side now of the old age question. It's like, no, he is old. It's like, is he getting old?
Yeah.
Now throw it out there. If you have a healthy Aaron Rodgers, they're going to be competitive because they do have those wide receiver weapons. You have Garrett Wilson there. You have Breece Hall there. Mike Williams they brought in. I mean, they have some weapons. So you kind of just want to see how he's going to play once he finally gets out there.
Yeah, and Rodgers, they do have a lot there with the Jets, that they're trying to work through, and they were the story last year. Everybody, but as you said, Kevin, he's 41 years old, and you start. Everybody always says to me, "Well, Brady did. Brady's aberration." Nobody is Tom Brady, and they're not going trying to duplicate what he did at 40 some years old at the quarterback position. It's just not a recipe for success. We'll see what Aaron Rodgers has, but I think he needs to be in camp. Right now, the Jets are a 7-10 team. I know everybody's going to talk about Zach Wilson and the games that they lost they shouldn't have, et cetera. But they have a tough schedule, and Rodgers needs to be there in camp working hard. And now this year they did prepare in case Rodgers does play. Hopefully he'll play more than 4 snaps, but they bring it to Rod Taylor, a journeyman type guy. And they also drafted Jordan Travis out of Florida State, a kid who got a tough knee injury. And at one point, he was looking like maybe a 3rd-round pick or so. And we'll see when he has left. But I do agree with you that, when you look at the Jets roster, other than age, they do have some firepower in terms of, Mike Williams, Garrett Wilson, as you said. I really like Breece Hall in terms of the running back position. He's a good, explosive young running back. The offensive line is going to be real interesting to see if these guys hold up because they have Teron Smith coming over from Dallas Cowboys in free agency. He's obviously a future Hall of Famer, but how much does he have left? John Simpson coming over for the Ravens. The Ravens stepped away from him because he was kind of underperforming. And then also in line, they bring in Morgan Moses coming over from the Ravens. This is like his 3rd, 4th team as well. So, offensively, we'll see how it shakes out for the New York Jets. But defensively, it's got to be their calling card. And when you talk about their defense, yes, you talk about the Williams brothers and Sauce Gardner. But it really, to me, it comes down to their head coach. And Kevin, I wanted to get your take on in terms of we're going to talk about coaches on a hot seat. And, it's interesting because I think Robert Saleh for the New York Jets has got to be on a hot seat in terms of this season. I think it's his 3rd season there. he's no longer building. You always love that term, and these newer coaches, these younger coaches, oh, we're building towards something. Well, the building days are over because I think Woody Johnson there, who's the owner, Joe Douglas, they need results immediately. And as we were talking about with Aaron Rodgers, it's win now type a season for them. So we'll start talking about coaches on the hot seat here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game on Broad Street South Network. And we'll start with Robert Salah. I think he's firmly on the hot seat. So first talk about Salah and then maybe go over any other coaches you think are on a hot seat.
He's definitely on the hot seat. There's no doubt about it. You're playing in that market right there that doesn't have a lot of patience. So the fact that you've gotten this far right now, you need to win now. There's no doubt about it. McCarthy in Dallas, he's got a like Matt Millen picture thing going with Jerry Jones, how he still has a job. I have no idea how he's there, but this has got to be it for him as well. And the third one I'll throw out there for you, McDermott in Buffalo. They were about to run him out in the back end of last season until they got caught fire and got there into the playoffs. So
now
I think there's really a short leash on him as well.
Yeah, now they just gave Sean McDermott a extension. We'll see how that plays out, but I do agree with you. At a certain point, the window is closed or is closing, and you look at that Bills team, how often they're going to get close and not get it done. So, yeah, I could see him being a coach on a hot seat. You talked about Mike McCarthy. He came out recently there was a report actually today that he's quote unquote fed up with Jerry Jones, and the Cowboys have not done enough this offseason, which they haven't really done anything. They've stayed packed. Other than bringing Ezekiel Elliott back and giving him number 15, they have not done a lot this offseason. And I think it's going to be a long season for the Dallas Cowboys. Nobody's going to be crying for them. But I think McCarthy is firmly on a hot seat. He's on the last year of his contract, so he's a lame duck coach. And you start wondering, Joey B chimed in, the writing's on the wall. And I'll throw this out there. There's crazy rumors for the Dallas Cowboys. They bring in Deion Sanders and his son in a combo deal. Do you think that could actually happen for the Dallas Cowboys? I just don't see an NFL team putting up with some of Deion's shenanigans.
I think if you're the Dallas Cowboys, you would. I think Deion, if he creates quite the media circus around him, and Jerry Jones thrives on that. He loves everybody talking about the Dallas Cowboys, and especially an old former Cowboy in there. They're just going to play on that. We're going to restore ourselves to greatness and everything else. So could I see that happen? Absolutely.
Yeah, it could, because it's become a circus down there, and it's been a long time since his team was. Yes, they've won 13 games the last two seasons, but it's just playoffs or bust for them. And in the playoffs, they've been bounced out in embarrassing fashion at home. This year, it was the Green Bay Packers that did them in, and you clearly saw the deficiencies of this team. Yes, the Dallas Cowboys had a lot of firepower on paper, but in terms of actually winning, Dak comes up short in that big situation once again. And it's been an interesting off season for them. We'll see how that plays out. Some of the other coaches on the hot seat, I know we do a lot of stuff down in the South Florida area. In Tampa Bay, Todd Bowles, I think, once again, is on the hot seat. I think he's kind of stuck around. He did a good job in terms of getting to the playoffs once again with Baker Mayfield. But, you just wonder. I always feel like that organization is like, oh, they might want to trade up away from him and get a younger mind in there. You had Canales, who was sitting there for a while, and then Canales goes to Panthers to take that job. So what do you think in terms of Todd Bowles? Is he on a hot seat?
I think he definitely is. It's always a shakeup, and the whole thing is you expect Todd Bowles to win with Baker Mayfield. He made the playoffs, man. That's as good as you can do with Baker Mayfield. You can't expect him to do much more than that. I mean, sure, he's got a shot in that division, but this is probably it for Todd Bowles as well.
Yeah, so he's on a hot seat. We saw Atlanta make the change. We saw the Panthers make the change. In the NFC South, Dennis Allen for the Saints. I got to put him on a hot seat. He has not. I don't even know. I know he replaced Sean Payton when he was suspended, and then he came in there. The Saints always just seem to be. Uh, I know it. They play more than 16 games, but he's always 8-8. You know what I mean? So it just seems like the Saints are always 8-8, and then they came up short against Tampa Bay in a key game last year for the division. And I just think Dennis Allen his message is kind of stale with the team. They're stuck in neutral, you know. So I think that Dennis Allen is on a hot seat.
There's certain teams here you can't go any further than the first round of the playoffs with who you have at quarterback. Derek Carr,
Right.
where's he taking you? There's no Baker Mayfield. Where are you going? You can get maybe a home playoff game to get some revenue for your team, but there's what 5 to 7 quarterbacks that you can make a deep run with. If you don't have one of those guys, that's as far as you can go.
Yeah, and the front line you gotta have a front line quarterback in this league. It's quarterback driven league. Yes, we talked about Justin Jefferson getting that huge contract, but the first question is who's going to throw the ball, and if you don't have a quarterback, you're in trouble in the National Football League. And I'll throw another one at you. We talked about the quarterback earlier, Brian Daboll. As crazy as it sounds, a couple of years ago, Daniel Jones had that playoff win, and they gave him the big contract, but he got hurt last year, and you saw a lot of deficiencies with the New York Giants. And I know from talking to our buddy, Rich Quinones, huge Giants fan. I talk to him all the time. The cover's pretty bare there for the New York Giants, other than Malik Neighbors coming over. So Dayball, as crazy as it may sound, he may go from the penthouse to the outhouse real soon.
Well, it's kind of you put yourself in a bad position when your starting tight end wants to be a music singer now, and he retires from the NFL. Thanks for coming by, Darren Waller. Good luck to you. He's releasing music now, so. And the whole thing is they've always had the problem with the wide receivers as well. They have a bunch of guys of the same guys, so you go out and get Neighbors right now, but you got Danny Dimes throwing in the ball. So what are you going to do with that team? And you're financially with Danny Dimes, that's not helping.
Yeah, and they're stuck with that contract for a while. That may be another one like the Russell Wilson situation where the Giants have to eat some salary cap money, get really bad, and then go after one of these players that is coming out of college, because I just don't see it getting any better with Daniel Jones. As you were saying, it's just something like how far are you going to go with him? And I'll throw one more at you. Nick Sirianni is in the last year of his contract at the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I think the Eagles will have a good season, and they are supposed to win their division. But if things don't go well, you have Vic Fangio, who's a former head coach, and you have Kellen Moore, who was always a coach in waiting with Dallas, and he did some good things with Chargers, sitting in the bullpen. So as crazy as it sounds, with Sirianni made the Super Bowl a couple years ago, is he on a hot seat?
Yeah. Nick Sirianni, all right, just throw it out there. Eagles should win that division. They should get off to a good start, we're saying. But say they get out to a 3-5 start. Nick's probably gone. Because think about, once again, the Philadelphia market, they're definitely going to turn on him. As soon as they make some call that they don't like, that stadium at the Link is going to boo as hard as you've ever heard them boo. And I think Kellen Moore would be the one who would get the job.
Yeah. And one we had scheduled release day, I think, during our hiatus. And I'm looking at these schedules, so we can just start looking at some of these. Week 1, they're in Brazil. That's Green Bay. And then they have Atlanta on a Monday night. Then at New Orleans, at Tampa Bay for Angel's favorite game. I'm sure he'll have a big tailgate down there once again. And then they have their bye week 5, which is early. They have an early bye, and then they got to kind of play behind that. Cleveland, at Giants, at Cincinnati, Jacksonville on a Sunday night. Week 10, they finally play at Dallas. Washington on a Thursday night, week 11, at the Rams on a Sunday night, at Baltimore, And then at the end, it gets a little better at the end. Carolina, Pittsburgh at Washington, Dallas in week 17 in Philadelphia, and then they finish with the Giants. But as we talked about last year, there's no guarantees. Who would have said they were going to lose to what is it, Tommy DeVito late in the season, or Kyler Murray at home? So you can't chalk up these W's. Like my one buddy, I was just talking to him this weekend. He's like, "That's a win. That's a win. That's a win." You just can't do that.
Now I'm gonna flip back to what Kevin said.
And the NFL is a week-to-week league right now.
I'm going to flip back for a second to what Kevin talked about earlier when you had mentioned about the Eagles' Nick Sirianni. And I'm not a homer by any means, but I think, and even we had talked about it with Q, and one of those things that we have said was that if you look at what the Eagles have done, Jeffrey Lurie, I think, is not going to go through. Now, comparing obviously Chip Kelly and Nick Sirianni is two different things. But at the same time, I don't see why the Eagles would end up keeping Nick Sirianni, even if they start at 0-4, yet alone 0-5, because basically you're carrying over what you did last season onto this season. The other thing that drives me bananas when it comes to Nick Sirianni is we did not get this. Granted, they had a hot start, but we put no one in that was on the first line on the O-line. They didn't play now one series together during the preseason. I understand it's condensed. I get all that. But I think that's the one thing that he needed to make sure that he put together versus week one. The other thing, too, when it comes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Todd Bowles should have been out. I'm sorry, but I'm not a Todd Bowles fan. I don't know what they were thinking on that behalf. I thought Byron Leftwich should have been a very good candidate. If not, at least Dave Canales. But we'll see what Dave will do in North Carolina.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback off of that. Sirianni, he has to be held accountable for losing 6 of their last 7 games, and then they basically were embarrassed in the playoffs. That team didn't even show up. So I do think everybody's going to say, "Oh, each season's different, et cetera." He made it to the Super Bowl, but he's got to be on the hot seat. And I think Lurie and Howie Roseman are making that statement and not giving him that extension and making him earn that. And as I went through the schedule there, they cannot sit back on their laurels because they are hunted. They've done so well over the years. And Sirianni's big mouth, and we can talk about it, he's always saying a lot of stuff he shouldn't, and it kind of gets him in trouble. So we'll see. And then Todd Bowles, I kind of agree with you that he is on a hot seat because this team's the Tampa Bay team's just been kind of underachieving. They were at such heights with Tom Brady, and then Tom Brady obviously leaves. There's some drop off there. But there just did not seem to be a plan in place after Brady left, and they brought some guys back and they have some pieces there, but I just wonder how far they're going to go with Baker Mayfield. Yeah. Go ahead, Kevin.
I think it's basically what we were saying earlier. There's certain quarterbacks you can only get so far in this league with, unless you get a lightning in a bottle season, and I don't think Tampa Bay has the weapons to do that, which will probably be the demise of Todd Bowles.
Yeah, and every year they're changing 6 to 7 head coaches, and it's just the cycle. So if you're a guy that's, look at Doug Peterson. He wins Super Bowl for the Philadelphia Eagles 2017, and then 2 years later he's moving on. So it's just crazy how that happens for some guys. And then other coaches like Belichick stayed there for 20 years, Jeff Fisher, Andy Reid now, Andy Reid in Philadelphia, 14 years now. He's going on, another 10, 11 years with the Kansas City Chiefs. So, it's just you have to have that relationship with the ownership. Like we talked about Mike Tomlin. Yes, Mike Tomlin, he won a Super Bowl early in his career, and he's kind of stumbled. And then we all joke around, he's never had a losing season. But he has that key relationship with the Rooney family that he feels secure, and he understands, okay, I can change my team around and the coaches around and kind of keep moving forward without having to worry about my job. So it's going to be interesting. Oh, get out of here about hot dog eating contest, Joey B. But anyway, so as we head to training camp, Kevin and I are going to start looking at all the divisions and the teams in the divisions. I figured we start with the AFC North. Kevin is based kind of in the Mid Atlantic area, so he's covered the Ravens, been around them. So we'll talk about the AFC North, looking at their teams, and I'll go back to Cleveland. We talked about them a little bit earlier. Last year, lightning in a bottle, which we failed to talk about when we talked about Deshaun Watson. The team actually might have been better without Deshaun Watson, Mr. Guaranteed Money quarterback. You had Joe Flacco come in there, and they finished second in this division, 11-6. They did, however, lose in a wild card. They kind of stubbed their toe. Flacco came back to earth against the Houston Texans. And their offense scored a little bit more than their defense allowed. So they allowed 23. They scored 23 points per game, allowed 21 points per game. Very good at home, though. Cleveland was. They were 8-1 at home. And their last 5, which they really picked it up, they finished 4-1. So what are we looking at when we're talking about the Browns? Kevin Stefanski, he's done a pretty good job there. Ken Dorsey's the offensive coordinator. Do you think the Browns can stay where they were, or do you think they take a step back to AFC North?
I think they take a step back, and what really hurts them is not having Nick Chubb for a whole season. Nick Chubb coming off an injury right now.
That's a good call.
And you have Ford as the other running back there. I mean, that really hurts them. When you have a good defense like they do, a very good defense, you could run the ball, you could take some time off that clock. And does Deshaun Watson have 17 games in him? I doubt it. So then you have Jameis Winston now as your backup there as well. I just don't think Cleveland's making the playoffs. I'll put it that way. I think there's at least two, maybe even 3 teams in that division better than them.
Yeah, and they have a lot of names. Myles Garrett is there, defensive player of the year. He had 14 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, and I do think that's a great call out on Nick Chubb. That injury was devastating. ACL, MCL, PCL. We'll see if he's able to come back from that. One of the best quality running backs out there. Cleveland, they have that second place schedule, so they have some tough games. They play Dallas week 1. They're at Philadelphia in week 6. Baltimore week 8. They have their bye in week 10. And then they have down the stretch, they play the Steelers on week 12 on Thursday Night Football, and then they're at Pittsburgh week 14. They also play Kansas City. So I do believe this is a tough gauntlet schedule for the Browns, that they do take a step back. Flacco caught lightning in a bottle. He's now the backup. I think he's in Indianapolis now as the backup there. So
Indianapolis, yep.
Yeah, we'll see what he can do. So moving on, Cincinnati Bengals. They're an interesting team because you always figure with Joe Burrow, you're never counted out. But Burrow at 28, I started looking at his career. He's had a litany of injuries. Last year it was the wrist. He hurt his knee before. And yes, as good as he is and as much money as he makes, you just start wondering about his durability. And he's been around the league for some time. But the Bengals, they're built around Jamar Chase. So he's going to want a contract as well. He sees his buddy Jefferson get that money. He's going to want it. You talked about Joe Mixon leaving earlier. Now they have Zach Moss there. This is another one of teams. There's a weird trend in the NFL. Some of the bad teams, they allowed 22.6 points per game, and they only scored 21.5 per game. Only 1-5 in division. Finished 3-2 their last 5. So what are you thinking in terms of the Bengals? Can they have a bounce back? Where are they in this division?
They could possibly win that division. If you give me a healthy Joe Burrow for the whole season, I think they can win that division. The smartest thing they probably did was make sure that T. Higgins came back, because you need that 1-2 pop with Jamar Chase. And it was one of those, he wanted to be traded, and they basically didn't cave. They didn't cave to his needs, so he's got to sit it, and he's got to play with them one more year. It's going to be between them and Baltimore. And I think that's it. Pittsburgh's going to be Pittsburgh. They're going to hang around 500, maybe a game over, maybe a game under, but they're going to be right there. Cleveland, I think, is just a little bit under them. So you got, I'd say Baltimore 1A.
Gotcha. All right. So we'll look at the Steelers real quick. Interesting team because, as you said, they get rid of Deontay Johnson. He's now at Carolina Panthers. The receiving core is George Pickens, who's an explosive player, kind of inconsistent, is he only a deep threat? They have him, Van Jefferson, who's kind of bouncing around, and then one of Kevin's favorite players from Philly, Quez Watkins, is now on the Steelers. They tried to remake their offensive line with guys like Isaac Salamalu coming over from the Eagles, and then they drafted Zach Frazier coming out of West Virginia, former wrestler. He's going to be their center. We talked about Freiermuth. Wilson, as always, I have this debate with Rich Q all the time. His numbers were better than he was last year, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He's got a lot to prove, and can he hold off Justin Fields? So the Steelers, as I said, we always say 8-8, never had a losing season, but it's all going to be contingent on can TJ Watt stay healthy and the rest of that defense.
Definitely. And also with Pittsburgh, you have to wonder, are they going to run that two-back system? Because Jaylen Warren was getting a lot of touches with them as well, taking out Najee Harris's touches. I mean, if you can execute those two together, it could make up for not having that second threat as a wide receiver. You can go with a Van Jefferson maybe or something like that, because you have Freiermuth, you have Pickens, and then if you utilize these two running backs, all of a sudden you might have a little something there.
Yeah, and I think Arthur Smith is going to get back to them trying to run the football. Najee Harris, we know he's a pretty good back, kind of inconsistent. Jaylen Warren, as you said, surprise player from last year. They're going to try to – their offensive line is big, and they're mauling. They're going to try to get to that running game. I think they've gotten a little too pass happy ever since Ben Roethlisberger days. So we'll see how that plays out for the Steelers. They're another team. They blamed a lot on their offensive coordinator, Matt Canada, who's no longer there. But we'll see, can they continue to have this streak and make the play. They limped into the playoffs last year, but we saw that they had no chance in that playoff game. Watt had 19 sacks last year. I think he's going to have another MVP type season. And the Ravens. This is where Kevin's located with this team. Now the Ravens, it's playoff or bust for them. To me, for this team, Lamar Jackson's now a 2-time MVP. We'll see if he's able to, play at a high level. They scored a ton of points, 483, fourth in the league, 28 points per game. And then their defense was their calling card. They were first in the league in terms of points allowed, only 16.5 per game. Down 3-3 in the division now. And then in the playoffs, they had that stinker after being the number 1 seed. So what do we think about in terms of the Ravens?
The Ravens' defense definitely took a hit as well because they lost Patrick Queen, who signed with Pittsburgh. So you have him there. So you not only lose a linebacker of his stature, but he also goes to a division rival as well. The thing with Baltimore, the running backs can't stay healthy. They never can. So you have Lamar running the ball, and Lamar has to run the ball. And what happens eventually? Lamar's going to get hurt, because they put him in situations he should not be in there. They have big leads. They still have him running the ball. So you need to find a running back that you can just give the ball to at the end, because Gus Edwards and who was the other one? Dobbins. They both ended up
Dobbins.
Yeah, they both went to the Chargers now. They need to find a running back that can carry the rock.
Yeah, now they did sign. It's one of the bigger offseason signings, Derrick Henry. How much do we think Derrick Henry has left? I was talking to my son, and my son immediately said, the term they use all the time. He's washed, Dad. He ain't got nothing left. What do you think in terms of Henry? Does he have anything left? I still think he may have one more season, but I just don't know if he's going to be that bell cow to set up this offense that Todd Monken wants. They're saying they want to play smash mouth ball, but he has a lot of carries on his body.
There's a lot of tread off those tires, Lloyd. Your son's right. He's washed. He might have 1 year. He might have 1 year. But you can't give him the ball 28 to 30 times. You give that guy the ball maybe 14 to 18, but you have to have someone else, though, that you can give the ball to. You want that guy fresh by the time the playoffs roll around. If you have a fresh Derrick Henry at the back end of the season, okay. But if you sit there and burn that guy out by the time you get to week 8 or week 9, you're in trouble.
Yeah, and when I look at the Ravens, they drafted Nate Wiggins. They're trying to fix that secondary. So Nate Wiggins, they bring him in as 30th overall pick. They also, in the 4th round, they brought in TJ Tampa as well, trying to fix those cornerbacks make that defense better on the back end. Obviously, defense are calling guard. They're another one. They have a lot of tough games, the Ravens. So we'll see if they're able to get through this gauntlet. They open the season at Kansas City on a Thursday night. Then they have at Dallas week 3, Sunday Night Football week 4 against Buffalo, at Cincinnati right after that. Then they have Cincinnati on a Thursday night, week 10, at the Steelers, week 11. The Chargers, who are building basically Ravens West. They got Hortz, the general manager, coming there, and he must have 5, 6 former Ravens on the Chargers. So that's week 12. They're at the Chargers. Then the Ravens host Philadelphia week 13. They finally have their bye late, which is week 14. That could work for it and against you. So we'll see. And then they have Pittsburgh on a Saturday, and then finish at Houston on Christmas, and then Cleveland. So this is a wide open division. A lot of talent in the AFC North. All the teams are bunched together, and as crazy as it sounds, Kevin, I think the Steelers have a run in them. I think the Steelers are going to win this division. I think the Ravens kind of take a step back. Cincinnati's still trying to build something, and Cleveland caught lightning in a bottle last year. So right now I'm thinking the Steelers. That's only because of the consistency of Mike Tomlin, but typically my picks aren't right anyway. So anything else, Kevin? What do you think in terms of another great week here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football? Glad we were back with everybody. We had our little hiatus, but as we move on to training camp, we'll keep looking at divisions and all the big stories around there. Any last words, Kevin, before we shut it down?
Not at all. Glad to be back, though. It's like, let's get this started with camps. Let's get everything going here. Let's get all this season stuff going. I can't wait, buddy.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on Lloyd Manchester Inside Football on 102.9 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. We'll talk to you next week.